today, Megan, but a lot of good work. And with that being said, I want to first start off with our mission statement here at MAPS, where we create sacred partnerships that require the best in us to bring out the best in each of you. And that's one of the big reasons that I chose to come and be with MAPS here and work with MAPS, because that mission statement has always really hit me right here in the heart. You know, I love the fact that that is our mission statement here. That's always been a big factor to mine. I'll tell you a little bit more about my story in a moment. First, let's make sure you're in the right room. So if you came to How to Conquer Your Fear today, you're in the right place. If your hope was to catch the tail end of Abe's 30, 60, 90 course, you are about 4 hours behind and in the wrong place. So, and reach out to Jay if you need that link later. So I'll say that up front because it was a great course today. That being said, a couple of housekeeping notes for those that can. I'd love it if you could keep your cameras on and be ready to interact. I like these webinars to be as interactive as possible. I try to bring a lot of energy to these webinars, and when you all interact with me, it allows me to give that energy back. So if you have any questions, if appropriate, go ahead and drop it in the chat and I'll answer it when it's appropriate. I figured out the mystery of having the chat open at the same time. So, and then as always, you're taking the time to be with me today. I'm taking the time to be with you. Again, if possible, put your phones away. Just throw them out of here. I'm not going to ask you to do anything on your phones after the next 30 seconds. And the first 30 seconds that I'm going to tell you right now is please go ahead and share that you are in this class. Feel free to share it on Facebook Live, wherever else it might be. Anything that gets more attention to the fact that you are growing and that you're doing things to help grow yourself in your professional career will help any of your clients and those in your circle to think more about you as they're going to grow too. So in the chat or live and in person, feel free to let me know a couple of these questions. And that is, what's one thing that you're afraid of? One thing you're afraid of. And then how often do you face this fear in your life? And then this one, you don't need to put in the chat, but this is a bit of a heavier question, kind of a deeper question. Think about how that fear makes you feel when you're encountering it. So I'll give an example. I'll give two. One is for me in lead generation. You think that after lead generating for 25 plus years in my life, that I would be able to pick the phone and call people easily. And yet for some reason, that first phone call always gives me this pit in the stomach feeling of dread, you know, every single morning. And then when I get out there and I start having the conversation, and it seems to go a little bit easier. And after that, things are a bit easier. But that's one example. Just making that first phone call every single day was always a little bit harder for me. Second, it goes along with that, and I actually put this in my video if any of y'all had a chance to see it leading up to this, and that is live, Facebook Live. I have yet to get over that fear, and I don't do live very often. Most of my stuff is recorded, even if it's just one take. But the act of being live puts me in a position where I feel like everybody's looking at me without my clothes on, standing up on stage. So, so just makes me nervous. But what about you? We've got Megan in the chat put falling. Anytime you're walking up or down the stairs, you have a fear of falling. Okay. You want to tell us a little bit more about that? Did you actually fall when you were younger that gave you this fear, or it's just?
I have that dream where you dream that your teeth fall out too, you know, and they say that that's like a perfectionist kind of thing or whatever. But yeah, I have a dream. I have like a fear of falling. Like I'm just scared I'm gonna like wipe out, bust my teeth out, and it's just gonna be an ugly scene all over the place. Not that I've ever done that, but you know.
So you, how does that affect you in life? Does that make you slow down on steps a little bit?
I take the elevator a lot.
Okay. All right. So that cruise ship challenge of taking the stairs is not for you. Noted. Nope. Jason put it to the chat, hosting an event that nobody comes to. Jason, I know that that's not you. Jason, I have been to some of your events. And love the energy you bring to the room, sir. Tell me a little bit more, though.
Well, for me, I think there's this path of least resistance. I think rather than planning an event that's great, I plan an event that is good enough for people to show up. You know, I don't kind of go, and probably applies to other things in my life, probably in general, rather than kind of going all in. I try to protect myself, when putting myself out there, whether it's asking for a sale or specifically hosting an event, for sure.
So sometimes you steer away from the subjects that you're afraid might not bring the attendance because you want to make sure people show up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, or even just almost like putting an excuse out there for an event before I even do it. Rather than just stuff out there, I want to do it in conjunction with another event, or kind of giving myself a escape valve constantly.
Yeah, I hear you. This class, by the way, was one of those for me. It's kind of a passion idea, and I didn't think it would get as big of an attendance list as many of my others. And it's kind of true. There's 8 of you here. I think only like 12 registered, and so 8 out of 12, or is actually a pretty good show up rate. But and usually I get 40 or 50 people to register for one of these things. So that's okay though, because I knew that the people that showed up would really care about what would happen here. So that's good. I appreciate everybody that did. Facebook Lives are scary for sure. Geraldine, Sean, Romina, Patty, any of you want to share?
Oh, I'm going to say that I'm probably afraid of coming across as being needy. So I'm very reluctant to ask for referrals when I just check in with clients. I'd rather come to them and say, hey, I'm here to give you this, or I'm here to help you with that. And I don't want to come across as feeling like needy. Yeah.
All of us that are in sales, I can guarantee you relate. You are, I could pretend and say you're the only one that's ever felt that way, but but I have a feeling you've got 7 other people on this call that completely relate to that feeling. Anyone else want to share before we move? All right, and we'll move on here in just a moment. We're gonna get back to some of these. So again, keep these in mind. I don't know if this is the fear that you signed up to take the course for, but keep these in mind. And especially, again, the feelings that you have surrounding them. So we already kind of went over the social medias, post some ahas afterwards. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me. I'm Jeff Kuhn. I am a One Thing certified coach and a coach for business maps. And as part of that, I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I signed up for MAPS was because, and decided to partner myself with MAPS, was because of their mission statement. I started my career at Chuck E. Cheese. And, speaking of fears, we're going to go through my timeline here a little bit with some fears. So that's actually me in the costume. It's not really, but I tell people that just to make them smile. So one of the big fears that people had working at Chuck E. Cheese was that they would actually have to get into that costume. It was one of the least desirable things that they would ever need to do. The sweatiness, the smell, the act of just kind of being a fool. They were never super excited about it. And it kind of led into the beginning of fears and fear process and overcoming fears. Moved on to work for Hasbro, which was my first district manager job, and then into GameStop. In Hasbro, I really helped to teach my people how to approach their clients and the other people walking into the store and kind of overcome that little icebreaker in the beginning. And in GameStop, I realized that we could help take the pressure off by going for the nose and learning to track your failures instead of your successes, which sometimes takes the pressure off. And through that, moved into Lumber Liquidators, and my first commission sales job. Took some of the commission sales into Tesla and Solar City, and then also in Vivint Smart Home, where I had an opportunity to work with a variety of different brands over the years and actually stand up in front of them, provide sales training, and provide a lot of different values through their clients to their store personnel, and move from there. Shortly after that, I entered the world of KW, which is how, I found out about business maps. And from the world of KW, was introduced to 2 books, the MREA, which we call the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, and then also a book called The One Thing. The models in those 2 books, I used to actually found a consulting company of my own in order to teach people those models and grow their businesses. Little did I know that all of these companies really had a couple of big things in common for me, and that was they really helped me teach and learn how to hire the right people, train them the right way, and help them achieve their dreams. Try to take all of these factors into any of the trainings that I do. And with that, today we're going to talk a little bit about achieving your dreams. So those factors all by the way, also carried me into MAPS business coaching and business maps coaching. So Gary and Abe behind the scenes, little did I know, also had this great idea to start a coaching and coaching company, coaching and training company based off of the millionaire real estate agent models and the accountability models and the one thing. Knowing that these two geniuses were running a company and partnering with other great companies using those models, it made sense for me to partner with them as well. And that's why we're here today. Looking at that, our webinar objective for today is very simple. It's identify a fear that's holding you back, or any fear in your life. Maybe it's not falling down the steps, because that might not be holding you back. Maybe it is. and then provide a simple exercise to learn how to overcome that fear in your life. So we just kind of did this on the intro a little bit, but first, raise your hand. Who here has experienced some fears in your life? Raise your, I'm watching, so camera's on where you can. Patricia's never had a fear in her life. All right, Patricia, there we go. Okay, good. We got some raised hands virtually too. Love it. So now as you think about that fear, again, we're digging deep into our feelings surrounding this fear. Romina, raise your hand. Thank you very much. Many of us, believe it or not, and I love this quote, you write it down. Many of us are afraid to admit that we're afraid. We've all had fear in our lives, and yet many of us are afraid to admit when we're afraid. We know every other person has fears, and yet we're not turning to others that are around us and confiding in them, admitting to those fears and asking for a little bit of leg up, a little bit of help to move along. In fact, more interestingly about that, some of the most famous people that you've ever heard of in your lives often have talked about the fears that they had before they went out and did their thing. Tons of professional athletes. Tiger Woods has been quoted saying that the moment that he has stopped having fear and nerves before taking his shots is the moment that he needs to retire, right? Because at that point he's lost the passion and the energy in the game. It's not really about being afraid. It's really about what we do with that fear as we notice and recognize that fear in our lives. So one quick exercise for you. So we've identified a couple of our fears in the chat. How about an action that you're procrastinating? This might not be recognized as a fear right now, but what's something in your life that you aren't doing right now that you know you should be doing, but you're holding back? Sean, I saw you nod your head a little bit. What are you thinking, bud?
Yeah, it's really reaching out to some key clients that I think could be key clients, but I some of my limiting beliefs and fears is that I just don't, I don't have the pedigree to be talking to those people. So yeah, that's what it would be for me right now. Pedigree is a good word, right? Like there's a lot wrapped up in that word. Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt. I appreciate that. Thank you, Sean. My pleasure. Who else has a action that they're procrastinating?
I have one. I've been procrastinating putting together a finance group on just a group of friends and family and really anybody who wants to join to track net worth every month. I'm not asking from it. I'm not asking anything, but I get this limiting belief in my mind that I'm not a financial professional. Who am I to come help people track their net worth? And I was realizing last week is it doesn't take a financial professional to help somebody just book a time and do the work. I don't have to be the expert for that. So I had a weird limiting belief around it that I hadn't really had, and that's what I've been working on this week. Yeah, no, that's great, and goes along with the pedigree idea, right? Like, who am I? Who am I to do these things? Right. Where's my worth? Love that. Thank you for sharing, Derek. Anyone else? Now, these are some tougher questions. If you don't share with me, take your pen. Make sure to write this down, because that's what this call is for. It's to dig into some of these tougher topics and give you, again, an opportunity and idea, simple steps to move forward. Okay. So speaking of moving forward, what is it that is keeping us from moving forward? It's where we start to get into that feeling a little bit. How's that feeling feel to you?
What's keeping you from moving forward? How's that feeling feel? Is that a good question? I don't know.
You have to get out of your own way, right?
Yeah, sometimes we are the ones standing in our own way. Sometimes it's others.
Mm-hmm.
When you're standing in your own way, what does that look like?
I say no for other people without asking them. I think it's really easy to do in sales. You're like, oh no, they don't need this right now, or oh, it's done. They don't want to talk to me about that, or I'm sure they know somebody else. And so you just kind of say no for them without giving them the opportunity to reject you, because maybe it's a fear you don't want to be rejected by them. But
Yeah, I do. There's a classic story, like sometimes you get those urban tales in the world, like, the guy with the claw that was grabbing onto the car, there's an urban tale in MAPS coaching. I don't know if it's a true story or not, but I definitely have heard the story over the years, that there was a client that had memorized their script, was getting out there and doing all the right things, and for some reason could never close a client. What do you think he was doing, Megan, that was keeping him from winning? Scripts were perfect. Tonality was perfect. Everything he was doing was perfect, but he wasn't closing clients. So they finally got him onto a Zoom call, and they figured out what the problem was. Any idea? So as he was going through the scripts, he started to ask the closing questions. Would you want to list with me? Why don't you list with me today? Hire me today. So all of his stuff was perfect, but he was literally shaking his head no as he was asking the question, because
he was saying no for other people.
Because he was saying no for other people. And why would you hire me today? I don't have any idea. So we keep getting in our own way, right? So how's that feel? Like when you're thinking about that feeling, and when you're feeling that fear, you're encountering that fear. You're like, it's in your life, right? Like, what does that feel like to you when you're feeling that fear? Describe the feeling.
It's a very defeated feeling.
Yeah, crushing.
Yeah, weight on your shoulders. Anybody else sometimes get that weird fluttery feeling in their belly? Like, like as you're approaching it, you kind of get that fluttery feeling, and then the more you let those flutters go, the more you sink down, pit of despair almost a little bit, right? That feeling, right? Is a real x-ray. I took this earlier today before taking this call. So let's talk a little bit about these butterflies, though. When have you ever described butterflies being in your stomach? Is it usually fear that lets you talk about butterflies in your belly?
Like when you're nervous, or when it's fear, it's anxiety, it's the fear of what comes next is usually what causes butterflies. Right?
So fear, nervous, anxiety. What else gives you the feeling of butterflies in your stomach?
Sometimes excitement.
Excitement?
Yeah.
Great. Sean, I saw you unmuted too. What did you have to say?
Yeah, it's, I think oftentimes I think it's characterized in terms of maybe a big moment, something athletic, you're at the line, or the last shot, or, you're giving your first presentation. That's kind of where, for me, that's how it kind of shows up.
Right. Again, back to Tiger Woods, right? When the moment he stops feeling that fear, the moment he stops feeling that energy, those butterflies in his stomach, the moment he knows he needs to retire.
Yeah.
So saying, yeah, absolutely. Before those big moments, those big games, before you run out onto the field, the excitement that you might have about something that's coming up, both fear and excitement give us butterflies in our stomach. Kind of strange. The reason being is because that's a neutral energy. That energy is neutral. So we're getting that feeling of butterflies in our stomach, that energy, and it really comes down to whether or not we choose to take a pause and determine whether or not that energy is going to be good energy, or whether that energy is going to be a bad energy. Are we going to take that and turn it into excitement, or are we going to take that and turn it into fear? So we went through this a little bit already. Some of you already said this in this last question. It feels crushing, feels demotivating. We feel that pressure on top of us. But how do you feel once that fear has kept you from moving?
Relieved. Wait, once it's kept us from moving?
Yeah, if it's kept you from moving, how do you feel?
Oh, you feel like you've missed opportunity.
Right?
Disappointed in myself.
So we have an opportunity to make a choice, an opportunity to choose a direction, opportunity to notice some of that energy inside of us and choose a direction to go. And when we don't go the direction we want to go, it's a crushing blow. It's hurtful. So Aristotle came up with what he likes to call the virtue continuum. And the virtue continuum goes through a bunch of different virtues, which we're not going to get into today. We are going to talk about one of those virtues, and that is the virtue of courage. So on the one side of courage, we have what? So looking at the deficit. On the deficit side of courage, you'll see that on there. What do we see?
Cowardice.
Cowardice.
Cowardice. Yeah. That's right. And on the excess side of courage, what do you see?
Recklessness.
Have you all ever met anybody in your life that using that energy charged too far, too fast, and actually like became destructive? So the opposite of losing, the opposite of fear, could be destruction from running too far, too fast. A lot of times that's actually what keeps us from moving forward, right? We're not really sure what we're going to break if we keep charging too far, too fast. So looking a little bit closer at that, we could actually substitute those phrases out. It's the golden mean, it's the balance point. Believe it or not, courage is actually the virtue that provides the energy for all the rest of the virtues, which is pretty wild. And as we look at courage and its cowardice or recklessness, again, we realize that that's really where our fear and our excitement come from. So 3 simple steps. Here they are. We're going to get into these a little bit more in some detail here in a moment. But the 3 simple steps are, 1, pause and acknowledge that fear. Pause, acknowledge that energy and the fear that you're feeling from it. Okay? The second one is to reverse your desires. And the third is to then optimize your expectations. All right. And some of that doesn't sound super clear right here, but that's okay. Here we are. You ready? Thank you, Katie, if you're watching, because Katie added this great little pause button for me on this slide. I didn't even think of it, and it looks awesome every time it comes up. So, so the first step is that pause. So when I tell you to pause, what does that feel like to you?
Slow down and think about it.
Slow down. I mean, I know, sounds pretty simple. Like that's the easy one. That is the simple step. You pause, you slow down. If you're pausing and slowing down, what else might you do?
Breathing.
Great, take a breath. Fritz Perls is quoted for saying, fear is excitement without the breath. Somebody else read that for me again.
Fear is the excitement without the breath.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that. What does that mean to you?
Well, when you get fearful, like you don't breathe. Definitely, you're holding their everything in. At least that's what I do.
Well, if you're not breathing, it's a scary thing, right? Like you're just counting down the minutes, not even minutes, the seconds until you have to breathe again. So there's a little fear in that, correct?
Yeah, there is. What else? What else could it mean?
To me, it speaks to motivation, that both of those things are sparks to generate action. It's just how you kind of handle that motivation, how you handle that spark.
Right? Yeah, so sometimes a breath can be something that you're holding because you're scared. And other times the breath is something that you take before you move forward, right? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the second step is to reverse your desire. So first pause, take a deep breath. Reverse your desire. So I once took a class called Bold, and in that Bold class, one of my instructors, a gentleman named J. Michael Manley, used to call this to horribilize your fear. So if you were to take a pause and think about what it is that you're afraid of, and if you pause and think about the things that you are about to experience, if you don't move forward, talk to me about the pain that is going to happen if you don't choose to move forward. So instead of reflecting on what you want to accomplish, reflect on what you have to lose by not taking action. All right, so I've got a little drawing here to illustrate this a little bit. And then I'm going to ask you all for some examples. So we've seen this before, right? This is our comfort zone. And then over here is where the magic happens. And we have to step out of the comfort zone in order to get to where the magic happens, right? Like we know that we don't have growth if we're staying inside of our comfort zone. But in the middle of where the magic happens in our comfort zone is a big wall. And that wall is our fear. It's our pain. It's the pain that we think we're going to feel by stepping outside of our comfort zone. Okay? So here's where reversing the desire comes in. You ready? What if your comfort zone was over a pit of gators? What happens if you realize that the pain that you're facing is actually occurring because you're standing still? What would you do?
Move.
Yeah, hopefully not stand still anymore.
Right? You're gonna quickly jump over that wall and get to where the magic happens. Am I right? So for you, standing in your comfort zone right now, looking at the fear that we were talking about at the beginning of this class, or even when I said, what fears are you procrastinating? What actions are you procrastinating? Identifying that fear in your life. Let's do the work, right? Like take the pen, write this down. For those that want to, you can share. In the meantime, take the pen and write it down for yourself. What pain exists in your life and will exist in your life by not jumping over that wall of fear? What gators are hanging out underneath of you that will keep you from being successful and going to where the magic happens? So for me, actually one of these just happened today. Like I've been holding off on Instagram. I post a decent amount of online content. I've been holding off on Instagram Reels for whatever reason, right? Like, I don't know why. It just seemed like something not to do. Today, I threw up an Instagram Reel for this class, coincidentally. And in half an hour, it had 1,500 views and 40 extra likes and whatever the case may be. And I was shocked because it's just been something I haven't been doing. And again, Facebook Live is one of those for me, right? Now, I know that the algorithms on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, they love the Facebook Lives. Those things always pop up on the top of your feed and tell you that somebody is going Facebook Live. And yet, for some reason, despite the fact that I know that I'm going to get so much more attention and so much better algorithm feeds in those surfaces, like I still sit there not allowing myself to get that extra attention and to grow my following, you know, which would help me get more attendees for these classes and whatever else it could be, potentially more clients and more people hearing the message that I want to get out there. I sit here and just act like a fool by not hitting that live button, which by the way is my next challenge for my 66 day. 66 days of live. Whew. Don't even give me breath, right? Breath. Here we go. All right. So anybody want to share? Looking at the pain that you're facing today by staying in your comfort zone, what pain are you facing today? Geraldine raised your hand again. Is that a hand raise?
Hers is still up.
Oh, hers is still up. That's weird.
Well, my fear is that I won't make the sales that I need to do on a regular basis. And by not doing that, I'm not going to pay for the people that depend on me. They won't have a livelihood. I'll wind up in the poorhouse and out in the street. And it's like it can be completely, it just can completely shut me down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an extreme example, but it's still something that runs through my mind.
That's the horribilizing though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we take that moment to pause and think about all the people that are affected by our bad decisions, it horribilizes it, right? And sometimes, again, we can take that pain and it can cause us to shut down. That's where those butterflies are coming from, that nervous energy, and cause us to shut down more, or we can use it to move forward, right? Thank you for sharing, Geraldine. I know that's not an easy one. And knowing that it's one of those things that could cause us to move forward. I don't know if any of you all have ever read The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. And if you haven't, this slide tells you everything you need to know. So I'm not, and who wants to read this slide for me?
I'll read it. So the 5-second rule, if you have an instinct to act on a goal, you must physically move within 5 seconds or your brain will kill it.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go is the example that is often done in the book. So remember, we're pausing and taking that breath. And then when we're reversing, we're looking at the pain that we're sitting in and we're reversing our desires. And then we're acting on it, right? So we're reversing our desires and jumping over that fear wall, jumping over that pain wall. So Mel Robbins gives this great tip here. This is actually something I've done for years, even before reading the book. And it's a count down instead of a count up. So notice that sheet, right? Because if I count up, what happens? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, right? Like it's not as effective, right? Like this is launching, this is taking off. This is an opportunity to spring forward. It's a countdown to movement. A countdown to movement, because we know that's what we need to do. We need to take a breath and go. So imagine that, again, looking at this pain that you've got in your life, imagine that countdown to movement. Now imagining that, let's come back and look at our timeline here a little bit, right? We've got our timeline. So we're going to step back one little step. We've got our timeline, and we already know that we've got our far left and we've got our far right on the timeline. Sean, you mentioned this earlier. Jason, you mentioned this earlier. And sometimes this is about figuring out just that one positive thing to get us to move forward, right? So we're trying to get over that little hurdle, that balancing hurdle between courage, our fear, and our excitement. It doesn't, you guys have all been on a seesaw, right? You know, and if not a seesaw, maybe the younger ones have been on those little Segway type things. You got to lean just a little bit forward to make the thing go shooting off. It doesn't take a lot of forward momentum to get you moving, does it? Literally, it's just a slight little move on the scale to start that from moving. So what is that one thing? What is that one little piece that if you could have one little piece of success, what's the one thing to get you moving forward? What's one piece of success that you would call a win, that and optimize it in such a way that you're setting yourself a small goal that allows you to get a win and move towards excitement. So for instance, this class, Jason, if you were the only one that showed up to this course for me today, would that have been okay?
Sorry, Jeff, it was breaking up there. Could you repeat it?
If you were the only one that was coming to this class today for me, do you think that would have been okay?
I would have loved every moment of it, but no, I mean, I'm sure that there's for many reasons, the more the merrier for you, for sure.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. The more the merrier for sure. And if only one person walks away with a positive from today, then my hour has not been wasted.
Sure.
Right? And so in that, you know, we need to notice and recognize what our expectations are. And again, we're optimizing our expectations. So if we're looking at our expectation from a fear perspective, what we're focusing on is a negative expectation. We're only thinking about the bad things that can happen. What's there to lose? What's the bad thing?
Sure.
If we start looking at our positive expectations, we start moving towards our excitement. What's the best thing that could happen? What's a good thing that could happen? If even one person walks away able to overcome and take that step forward from this fear today, I'm going to call that a win. It means I know that there's somebody out there that's being successful because of some time that I put into this. And to me, that's why I got into coaching. Geraldine, why'd you get into sales?
I fell into it by accident.
Okay.
I did. My mom was like, yeah, you should do real estate. That way you can spend all the time you want with your children and you know, set your own schedule, which we all know is kind of baloney now because, you know, we're kind of at the mercy of other people to a certain extent. But one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about like setting a small goal for yourself, I do the Brian Buffini stuff, and I have for a long time. And when the market tanked in 2008, you know, people were like freaking out. And he told a story of making it to the stick. And so it's an old slave story of how they would get up at the crack of dawn, even before the sun was up. And, you know, they had to pick like acres and acres and acres of cotton. And so, you know, if I'm sure like waking up and looking at this, you know, vast piece of land that you had to work, it was just so overwhelming. There's no way to conquer that, right? So they would pick up a stick and throw it, and they would just work and work until they made it to the stick. And then they would pick it up and throw it again. And so whenever I feel like that super anxious, like feeling where you're not taking a breath because you're like scared and your whole body is tensing up, I just think, okay, I'm just going to keep moving and I'm going to make it to the stick. That's all I can focus on right now.
So what's your stick? What's that one thing that you know that if you did it, it would be counted as an accomplishment?
You know, just picking up the phone and talking to one client that I haven't spoken to in a while.
Perfect. Did you know that in one day, that if you give your sales teams a really huge goal to hit for the day, that it is much less likely for that team to actually hit that number? So let's say like I wanted my sales team to each call, if they were outbound call people, they each had to call 20 people that day. I gave them a goal of 20. Odds of me hitting 20 are not very high, like actually getting in touch with 20. Now, if I gave them a goal of 1 and then encourage them afterwards to continue to make calls after they had that one successful connection, the odds of hitting 20 become much higher. Because the fear of moving forward to go after 20, which seems insurmountable until you can get 1, is huge. But getting in touch with one person, much more achievable and optimize expectation.
It's like the quote from The Power of Full Engagement that talks about how the more difficult a task is to start, the less likely someone would be to start it. And the same thing, like if someone said, hey, make 20 contacts, I'd just be like, they say make 1, like great. Yeah, make 1. And then then you break that seal and you're like, all right, that wasn't bad. Then I'll keep going.
That's right. Perfect. Exactly. So we're going to look at our little diagram again here. Okay. So we have our comfort zone. We have where the magic happens. Who remember what comes in between? What keeps us from moving out of our comfort zone?
That fear wall.
The fear wall. That's right. We got our fear and pain wall. So when we're optimizing our expectations, what we're doing, instead of looking at our pit of vipers, our pit of alligators underneath of us, what we're doing is we're focusing on the magic that could happen. And we're looking at that piece of magic that we want to accomplish, optimizing our expectation to find one thing in our life that's going to jump us up and get over and achieve. Somebody read this quote for me.
Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear.
Speak to me. Does that speak to you?
I think it's recognizing that fear, and I think the sort of the age we're living in, there's a lot of fear for a lot of people in a lot of areas of their life. And I see fear being a paralytic for some people. I see fear be a blinder for people, myself included. And, you know, when you lose clarity on what it is you want, you begin to disbelieve that it's there.
Yeah.
And so by acknowledging that, hey, that's the fear talking, what I want is there. It is on the other side. It's there somewhere. I just don't see it clearly. So getting clear on what you want, I believe, can help dissipate that fear. It helps you fight through it when you're clear on what you want.
Yeah, right. To identify those possibilities, to identify the magic that's on the other side of that fear, right?
You got it.
Yeah, love that you said that. One little piece I want to encourage y'all with, and this is where it gets fun for me, is very similar, you know, one thing coach, right? Very similar to the one thing as they teach us to knock down that first domino. When you start taking that first step to overcome that fear, when you optimize the expectation, when you move forward and knock over that first tiny fear, you find that more fears get easier and easier and easier to knock over. You know, not to go like extreme or anything weird in my life, but like I've been doing a little counting, taking the breath and moving forward with fears throughout my life in a large variety of ways. And there was one point in my life, in my careers, like you've seen my resume, where I had a friend that would always make that jump first. Like he went from Hasbro to GameStop first. He went from GameStop to Lumber Liquidators first. Like he always took that first step. And what do you think happened because he was always the one that took the jump first? You were muted, Megan. I see you answering. But
everybody else saw that it could be done. I mean, it just seemed like when you see somebody else do something, you're like, I could do that.
He was the leader. We followed him, right? What was interesting, though, is he got me to come first. Like I was the next one to go. And then everybody else would follow me. And at some point I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, and then he'd get promoted because he was the first one to take the jump. The first company that I was the first one to take the jump, what do you think happened differently? I was the first one promoted.
Yay.
And I only bring that up. Like he ended up getting promoted too, right? Like we grew together in a lot of different companies. Still a good friend of mine. And like the big difference that you all will all realize and go through in life, and as you realize and look at these dominoes, the big difference is the more comfortable you get taking that leap of faith, the more comfortable you're going to get, and the bigger the dominoes will fall, which is super exciting for me. So I also made up a little worksheet. If you guys thought this was cool, let me know. Let Jay know. We'll send this worksheet out to everybody that registered. But this is, to your point, Sean, you know, identify the action that you're procrastinating, identify the pain from taking that action, the pleasure that you're getting by not taking the action. We didn't spend a lot of time on that one, you know, but usually when you're sitting still, there's something that's going on that's keeping you happy, that's not making you look at that gator pit, right? So what are you gaining? What small amount of pleasure are you gaining by standing still versus the big cost by not taking the action? And then how much do you have to gain by taking it? So a little worksheet here I made up. I'll have Jay send it out to everybody that registered. So if you're on this call, that means you registered and you'll get a copy of this, which is cool. But in the meantime, how do we do? We said we were going to identify a fear. We said that we were going to give you some simple steps to overcome that fear. Give me some ahas. Any takeaways? And how do we do? Did we accomplish that today?
They don't have to be big, massive things to start to move forward. You know, it could be a breath. It could be, well, like you said, one call. Make one call then. Fine. Make one call. Just do one thing and then you're done. There you go. You did it. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, absolutely. I ran a sales team one time, Sean, I came into this market, it was failing. They couldn't do anything to get it to take off. And I completely flip-flopped the rules. They were making their people work longer and longer and longer hours to try to get the goals, and everybody was feeling more and more defeated and very unhappy with the job. And I came in and I said, work half an hour and get 2. Get 2 leads in half an hour. You can go home, have the rest of your day. They're like, what? Just do it. Go in and get 2. You know how motivating it is to work half an hour and get 2 leads when you used to be working 8 hours and getting 2 leads? And for those that didn't believe that it could be done, we just went in and did it. Who would rather take half an hour to make phone calls in the morning than sit there for 4 hours fretting about whether or not you're going to get a lead?
All day.
Who would like to set 2 appointments today?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every single one of us on this call, I guarantee, would be happy with 2 appointments today. And yet we spend 4 hours fretting instead of half an hour doing. I love it. Thank you for sharing, Sean. Who else?
My desk is my takeaway. I've got a whiteboard desk and I just have stuff all over it now. I'm like, man, it's spiraled out of control. I don't take a lot of notes, but I've written a bunch of stuff down. I love the quote, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And the question, what pain exists in my life because I'm in a comfort zone? That's how I rephrased it. But I mean, a lot of takeaways from me. They're going to turn into action.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you guys, if you're looking for a business coach, I raised my hand and offer to be one. If you're looking for somebody to teach this class in your group. So I'm also a transformational trainer with MAPS. I teach this class on the side as well. So if you can think of somebody else on your team or in your office that would appreciate hearing this class, please feel free to reach out, book me, and I'll happily come in and do a private show, so to speak. In the meantime, I'm going to send this out to each of you. My contact information is here. Feel free to write down my phone number. Feel free to write down my email address and let me know if you need anything or have any questions on this. I'd be happy to help work with you one-on-one to help overcome that first fear. Thank you all for joining me today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.